Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie Podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian, and joining me, as always, is your co-host, Jim.
Witty thing, because I got nothing witty.
Oh, you don't...
So
that's fine.
Insert witty thing here. No, I'll think of something. I'll come back and edit it in.
No pressure. No pressure. It's just...
the space reserved.
Your co-host, Hunter.
Welcome to HomestarRunner.net. This is a podcast.
Homestar Wanna. And your co-host, Spaz.
Brought to you by No Man's Sky and loads of building.
Yeah, apparently. That's the flavor of the week.
Brought to you by Spaz's unlimited Duke bug budget.
No, I've been, with this space I'm building, it's been totally legit.
And
farming for everything.
Friends, we have a guest this week. Joining us from Colorado. Where in Colorado?
I'm in Louisville, Colorado, which is just outside of Boulder.
Oh, okay.
Bunch of hippies.
Well, we are talking to Scott Brown, currently the president of Wormbite, which we will get to. But formerly, were you the president at NetDevil?
Yes, sir.
So, formerly the president of NetDevil, who, if you're listening to this podcast, you may know already. But if you don't, he's the guy that made Jumpgate, which, if you're unaware, was a first-person flight sim MMO that was released in 2001, originally by 3DO. And then it went to... Where did it go after 3DO? Was it Gazillionaire after 3DO?
No, it just basically went back to us. We ran North America, and a group called Mighty Games ran Europe.
Right, I remember that. Yes. So at first there were
I can tell all those stories as well.
Well, I no, not at all. We want to hear that. But yeah, so folks, Jumpgate was kind of an elite / privateer style first person flight sim, where you were. It was much smaller. It was a much more. It was more like the privateer universe than like the elite universe. It was more of a more contained yet more fleshed out universe. You know.
Yeah, it was fixed, not procedural.
Yeah, exactly. Which is great.
It was basically a game about the hatred of escargot and shooting the space shrimp.
There were space shrimp.
And it's true.
We love
the conflux.
We love the flux. We love the flux around here.
I thought Brian was talking about cornflakes all the time. I was just like, man, I hate that.
I somehow through a friend got a plushy manta. So
awesome.
I don't know how some friends like, I have this. Do you want it? Absolutely, I want it. Oh my god. But yeah, folks. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I probably have. Jumpgate's one of my personal favorite games of all time. Definitely in my top 5 or 6. It is definitely the game I've spent the most time with over its 11 years. I think it stopped officially in 2012 or 20.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
It's the only game where mining is any kind of fun.
Oh God, I love the mining so much in that game. That's what I did the most, because it was just so active and fun, and especially when you guys introduced pure mining. Like, I spent so many hours pure mining. But yeah, I probably have at least 5,000 to 6,000 hours in the game over its 10, 11 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was just so great. And so let's start at the beginning. When did you guys? Because it went into beta in '99, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was in beta for about a year or so.
Yeah, we started writing it in, like, I had the idea in '95, kind of '96, and started. So I didn't know anything about game programming at all. And there really wasn't, like, there wasn't the internet where you could just be like, how do you do joysticks or whatever, right? And so we kind of had to, like, figure it out on our own. And I started going to game developers conferences and just, like, absorbing everything I could possibly learn. And it wasn't until probably '98 that it started to, like, look like a game. The first engine it was written in was this thing called WinG, which was like Microsoft's idea before DirectX.
Oh, I don't even remember that, to be perfectly
And
honest.
then we started each version of DirectX. So we did, we ported it probably through every single version of DirectX up to, we went to DX8 right before it launched, I think. So like constantly evolving it as more and more DirectXs came out and stuff got better and better. But yeah, it was a lot of learning, and we didn't have any idea what we were doing. So
I have to.
Is it all C# or I mean, not C#, C++ or what?
Yeah, C++, and then the shaders were all assembly at the time.
You guys were hardcore.
I have to give you props for one specific thing. I have a HOTAS that is 3 separate devices, and so not a lot of games support that, especially games of that era. They do not. A lot of games do not support that, but yours does.
Yeah, we wanted to support. We wanted to support everything. Was kind of our idea. Like whatever kind of joystick you had, we tried to make sure it worked.
Yeah, I found that out by accident because I played Elite, and then I uploaded Jumpgate again, and I had everything plugged in, and it saw my throttle. I'm like, what? What's happening? So that was a lovely surprise.
Yeah, well, we tried. I mean, eventually it just became like the Windows joystick support, and you just have 1,000 different buttons you could map, and as long as your joystick had the same driver, it worked all right.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is, like, even like games like Free Space 2 and whatnot, they only supported one device. So when I play that, I have to play with the one stick that has all the axes. But with your game, I could use the pedals and the throttle and the stick and everything. It's fabulous.
Yeah, we had a guy that had like, he had like the seat and pedals, and he had like everything. And so he would just sort of like, he would just sort of tell us like, hey, this works, or these are showing up wrong. And then just in updates, we would try to catch him up and get his stuff working. And we kind of figured if he worked, then everybody would work.
Yeah, I was just playing it earlier today, and with my multiple devices, it worked great. So
yeah, awesome,
amazing. So basically, it went into beta, and you didn't have a publisher when you went into beta, right?
Yeah, so we were basically self-funded. So I had before this, I was like a very small owner of a educational software company and called Digital Creators, and we sold that company. And so I basically quit and started writing Jumpgate full time. And then what we did is we sold the rights to a company for Germany only for $300,000. And then that was enough money for Steve and Peter to quit their jobs. And then the three of us just worked on the game for a couple of years that we sort of lived off that money to keep us running for a while we got the game almost finished. And then they bought the full rights to Europe, and then 3DO came on and didn't pay us anything up front, but they're like, oh, we're going to do this big thing, and we love what you've built, we'll help get you in stores in the US. And then like promptly 3DO went out of business.
Yeah, that didn't work. That was such a shame. That was like their last game, I think. Or one of their last games.
So we never got a dime. Like any of the boxes sold in stores or any of that. We never saw any of that money.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just how it is. It's how it is, right? So yeah, we only ever got, and then we got the subscription money, of course, from people once we took it back over, but we never got any of the box sales or anything like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I bought I had like 4 boxed copies.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that you didn't get any of that.
Yeah, you helped Trip Hawkins, but you didn't help us.
God damn it. I'm sorry. I had no idea. That's kind of awful.
It's just the games industry. As I've learned, it's brutal. It's great and it's brutal. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then they ran it in Europe for a while, and eventually when the users got low enough, they sort of turned it off, and we kind of took over the world and then ran that until we sold to Gazillion, and then they just didn't want the hassle anymore, and so they shut it down. And at the time, we were developing Evolution with Codemasters out of Europe. Similar deal where they had the European rights and we were going to do something in the US. And Gazillion ended up shutting that development down also.
Oh, wait, so Gazillion shut down Evolution?
They did.
Ah.
So what kind of game was... Well, so you mean Jumpgate Evolution?
Yeah,
so
Jumpgate Evolution. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was so excited about that, and I was crushed when it was canceled. Like, utterly
I was too.
crushed. Oh, my God.
We had some really cool stuff. Like really cool stuff.
Oh, my God. I still have
But
some wallpaper.
Since it never came out, right, then it's kind of like you're at liberty to make it now, and they don't own it because it never existed. Right?
Well, so Tryon owns the IP Jumpgate at this point.
I should contact someone there.
Gazillion was very lawyery.
Oh boy.
And so I just never wanted to mess with it, right? Like it was just too risky. So yeah, that's kind of the story of where it was and where it went. Was it just didn't work out, unfortunately.
Which is a real shame, because there was some of the video released of Evolution when it was in progress and whatnot just looked like miles above what Jumpgate was capable of.
It was pretty, and it was basically like we took the Jumpgate engine and we're just putting like new graphics and more story kind of on top of it. Like we had hundreds of ships made. It was cool, and Codemasters was like, they were very supportive. They helped build a lot of cool stuff.
But when Gazillion shut it all down, they didn't have a choice in the matter either.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say much else. It got shut down with them, which was a really big bummer.
Yeah,
it was a huge bummer. I mean, because Jumpgate was for years it was so unique, and it came out at a time where there was like nothing else like it. Like nothing else like it.
Yeah, so we got most of our ideas of how to approach problems sort of kind of reverse engineering Warbirds. I don't know if you guys played that game at all.
Oh my God, yes, of course.
That was like, we loved Warbirds. And so it was like, here's its limitations and here's kind of how they address things. And so that was kind of where we got our inspiration of how to approach stuff in our games. That's why when the game first started, you could do a 4-character player name.
Oh gosh, really?
Yeah, that's why like Steve was Remo and Peter was Pizza, which was Piza.
Oh my God.
and I was Scorch was SCRH, I think, something like that. So like we only had 4. Like again, a lot of that came from Warbirds, just like how those guys worked and stuff.
I just figured, 256K of RAM, every character counts.
Yeah, well, at the time it was super limited. So
yeah.
And we were running on modems, right? Like, which is kind of hard to believe, but we had 100+ ships running on modems, which I'm still real proud of that. Like,
yeah, so I was amazing at the time, because I only got DSL like I think the second year Jumpgate was out. I was on a 56K until then, and it ran really well for being over a modem. By the way, Ambrosia says hi.
Hello. So we had, if you want to know some funny stories about, so like the city of Louisville didn't have any connectivity at all. So it was modem or nothing. And so we were looking for offices, and we found an office in a building that used to be an ISP. So they had at least T1 lines the building. And so we could use that. So for work, we had a T1. What
state was this in?
Colorado. And so, but before because we couldn't run our servers off of that, we had these servers that I had like duct taped bits and pieces together at one of my friend Ryan's, who later joined NetDevil, Ryan Seabury, and he was in Boulder, which had better connectivity. And so our stuff was in his college apartment. Like, we had a board literally balancing servers over like a sink. And those were connected to his DSL line. So the original Jumpgate servers were like literally these boxes in his apartment squished into a sink somewhere. We ran on those for a long time.
God.
It's like, it's got everything. It's got the kitchen sink.
Yeah, literally, we were sitting on the kitchen sink.
That's amazing. So
on DSL.
So I have to ask you about the flight engine, because a lot of new players did have some issues with it. It's a space game that has drag. Why is that? Why does it have drag?
Well, so at first we tried completely dragless, but it was just too hard for people.
Okay.
Like, I think if you played, what was the Elite that was totally dragless? Frontier?
Yeah.
And
that's fair.
And it was too hard. And so we came up with this idea that, like, it wasn't really drag. It was like thrusters that were trying to help you fly the way you were pointed, not the way you were, sliding. That was slowing you down. And so that was kind of the concept, was that, like, it was kind of like a flight assist. And even that was too hard for many people, but a lot of people loved it. And so, it took a ton of iteration. Again, this was coming from like a flight simulator where we wanted that, you're rewarded for your time spent learning the engine. And so that was the concept of it. Was like, we wanted a flight engine where, like, if you were great at the flight engine, it was something that took time, and it paid off, like, to be a great pilot. And then the guys who could fly the tows that were loaded with, super heavy amounts of cargo became, special pilots that, the skill was worth it. And then, later we added the flight assist, and in Jumpgate Evolution, we had the idea to have an even easier flight mode. But a lot of, like, the original pilots they never liked that idea. They liked that Jumpgate was hard, and being a pilot meant something, and so I dig that.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not complaining. I love the engine. It's second nature to me now. Like, I'm one of those people who could fly a tow full uranium and still dock the thing without using the docking computer. It takes forever, but you can do it.
Yep.
So the funny thing, like, my first experience in the game, like, I played it like way back in the when, but then didn't really play a lot of it. Right, I think I was like in one of the alphas or something, and then Brian got me playing on this like emulated version that's up today, and he showed me how to dock, right, and I got in the hangar, and then somebody was coming in. It was one of us. I don't know if it was Hunter or maybe it was Brian. It was somebody blew it, right, and they rang the station like a gong when they hit the outside. And I was just like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I'm just sitting there in the hangar and I just hear this bong.
And the great thing is, if you're docked to the station where that happens, you can still hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can totally still hear it on the splash on the outside of the station. It's great.
Yeah, the first station we ever made was the smaller Soul Rain one, the one that looks like a disc with like a little arm up top.
Yes.
And so, like, I spent many an hour just circling that station and, like, flying between the station and the arms, like, perfecting the engine and stuff. Like, when we first started, I didn't even know how to, like, import a 3D model or anything. And so we just I built like a giant thing of a grid of cubes And Steve was really the Remo is the math wizard. And so the flight engine is primarily his. That's like his design. And so, but we would just sit there and fly around until we got it good. You had to get there wasn't like an exporter, which is crazy to think about. Like, so I had to write my own exporter for 3D Studio. So I had to learn how does 3D Studio work and how does their things work? And like internally to them, verts and faces and stuff is stored wildly different than how game engines did it. So yeah, it was funny. Like there was a lot, it just took forever. That's why it took almost 5 years to build the game, because it was only a handful of us. And it was, every single step was like, oh, there's no exporter. And so now.
Yeah. So you're having to invent every wheel along the way.
Right. How would you write an exporter? But we came up with some cool stuff because we had to come up with it on our own too. Like Steve came up with a cool way of doing polar coordinates for our star systems. And because they were all seated, it meant that it was always the same stars in the same place, so that when you went to a certain sector, you could learn what was in the skybox, and it would always be the same each time you came back.
That was very useful for mining. Very useful for mining. Yes.
Or like mod hunting or whatever.
Yes.
Artifact.
Yeah, because I remember there were like asteroids that were out so far you couldn't see them. Right.
Correct.
And then but if you knew where they were, then you could fly out there. And when there's something like some of the asteroids were even black, right? So you just couldn't see them.
Yeah.
I think I actually ate one. Right.
I'm still mad
I was flying and all of a sudden, pow.
Yeah, I'm still mad at you guys for Emma. They've moved it. They've since moved it. It's not right in between the two gates now.
Yeah.
God damn it. But
that was funny.
Yeah, I'm sure it was
claimed
funny.
a lot of pilots.
Yeah, I was one of them. But one thing
there was no idea. There was no the concept of like a map editor didn't exist, right? Because again, there's no tools to build games from. So the artists would build the maps inside of 3D Studio Max, and then I figured out a way to like export that map out. But it was loading slow, and we didn't know a better way to do it. So I actually wrote a thing that like wrote the C code that described the map. So when you would export a map, it would literally make a C++ file.
Oh my gosh.
And so when it would do a map, it would just run that function. But it meant that maps loaded instantly. Like there wasn't like you jumped and you were just in the new map, which actually ended up being really cool. But yeah, it was like a stupidly ridiculous way to do that, but that's how we did it.
Now, one thing sorry, go ahead.
Well, so 3DO was funding, at the beginning of this, right? So
no, they never gave us any money.
Oh, well, I mean, there was like the deal, right? That was supposed to happen.
Right. They were just like a distributor, basically.
Okay. So was their console like a completely dead thing at that point? Or was there
a talk of years at that point? Yeah, it'd been dead for a long time at that point.
Yeah. It was basically like, so one of the things that I think we were the first people to ever do was to combine real-time data on the web with an MMO. And so we had all this stuff like leaderboards, and you could see like, I think we were also the first people to ever do like group missions where like people could work together towards the mission completion. And then all that data was output to a web page. And so when you weren't in the game, you could see like what's going on in space and where are the battles and so 3DO had this idea of doing this thing between all their games with this metadata. And so I think the only reason they liked our game wasn't that they liked the game at all, but that they wanted our tech to like power some of their other stuff. It's one of those things you learn later. I could tell you the story. Like, so there was three publishers who were interested in publishing our game, and I chose the worst possible one. So there was 3DO, which I'm like, this is Trip Hawkins, the guy that started EA, and I kind of was starstruck a little bit by him, thinking like this is going to be the best deal possible. But the other guys were Mark Jacobs, and they they hadn't released Dark Age of Camelot yet. And so he's like, look, you can be very successful. We can get you 15,000 players, and MMOs don't need to be 100,000 players. It was funny, his whole speech. And like right after Dark Age came out and was a very successful MMO.
Yeah, was he the guy that founded Mythic or what?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Oh man.
And so I had like, so that was one group that I think would have been a killer partner for us. And then the other group that I think would probably have been the best was this company called Simultronics, and they had this game on Genie that was a mech game. What was that called?
Is it Multiplayer BattleTech?
No, it's oh man, what was that game? I have to look it up.
I know what you're talking about. I cannot remember the name either.
It wasn't Multiplayer BattleTech, but it was very similar. And so they had this game. Anyway, he was like, I love your game, and we don't have a ton of money, but I'm really good at like finding partnerships, and we'll find a way to make this thing amazing, right? And it's like, you know, hindsight 2020, like I think those guys would have also been like a killer partner, because I don't know anything about publishing and marketing, and you know, like we barely knew enough about developing, right? And so yeah, those were my choices, and I picked 3DO. Unfortunately.
Yeah, of course, these days, if you could self-publish, you'd be in a different world.
Yeah, but even with self-publishing, you still need PR and marketing, and there's skill sets to that I still don't have. I'm a developer.
Yeah,
that's what I think about.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you don't have to worry about like your publisher closed down because it's for faults of not your own, right?
Yeah, distribution is the thing that's kind of solved, because nobody cares about going to a store and buying a box, or fewer and fewer people do. So that was it. Those were my choices. Those were the groups we had found, and yeah, that's who I picked.
Oh man.
Have you ever talked to the guys over at Vendetta Online?
I have not.
Oh, you should. That would be a fun conversation, because the Vendetta Online is a very Jumpgate-ish kind of game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
But not as good.
It's like
not as good.
Not really. But I mean, I think a lot of the fault of that is the difference in the flight model, right? Because your flight model was just a lot more responsive and fun.
It felt like you were actually flying somewhere rather than whatever you're doing in Vendetta.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, this ship will kill you if you. It's like it can be the best thing, but it will also kill you if you don't respect it. And their game is more like point and go sort of thing. But it's they've got a similar, like, there's 3 factions, there's stations and sectors and stuff, and trade routes around things and that. They've got sort of an NPC thing that's unlike the Conflux. It's like a generic robot drone thing that's out there. Different flavors of that, but it's still like, kind of like a zombie enemy to fight, right? Where it's like they'll chase you, but they're not aggressive, where they're like invading your stations and stuff. It's just like, if you go out where they are, they're a problem.
Yeah, our original intention was not to have AI, but there just wasn't enough players on all the time, and so AI made sure there was at least something to do always.
Yeah.
And that's why we added them.
Yeah, how did you come to design them? Because they're all very different.
Well, so we're all like, we like diving. Like, that was like a big thing. So that's why like NetDevil came from, like, we were trying to find cool fish studio names, but everything was taken. I mean, even in 97, everything was taken, like shark and stingray and like all the stuff you'd think of that sounds cool. And we found in the dictionary that fishermen called anglerfish net devils.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, hey, we're an internet company. Like, this is a cool name. And so that's where the name came from. And so Conflux is the same thing. They were like fish. They were like aliens that were fish or whatever. And so that was just where our mind was.
Yeah, I remember you guys at E3 with you had like the black polo shirts with the little angler fish on.
Yeah,
the,
I loved
on the
our
pocket.
logo. I thought that was cool.
It
Yeah,
is
it
a
was
great
neat.
logo. It is a great logo. So I wanted to ask about something that very few other games have gotten right, it's your economy. Like with a game like Elite or even Vendetta, the economy doesn't feel like it matters that much, you know. But with your game, it matters a lot. There are a ton of moving parts. Like you need this material at this station to make this piece of equipment, you know, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and it's up to the players to get it there, and if they
Yeah.
don't, then you just don't have that, which is
Exactly.
a problem whenever the enemy shows up, and they do. So,
Yep.
you know, so it forced a trucker economy to be going on in the background. It's not just like everybody can jump in fighters. We need people that are miners. We need people to haul it.
Mhm.
And-
Yeah,
and
it made everybody
nobody
important.
else does that.
It made everybody
Yep.
important, which was amazing. So
Well, you want like a thing that's hard to pull off, and most MMOs don't even try because it's hard to pull off, is you want a world that the players matter, right? And that your actions have like real ramifications, where like when you're playing an MMO where there's a boss and everybody's killed the boss, it doesn't really matter that you killed the boss, and killing the boss doesn't really do anything, right? And so that we were trying to make, we were thinking about it differently. I mean, it's funny because I kind of think everybody thought that way at the beginning, right? Because Ultima Online was the same way early on, right? It was like there's monsters and they have priorities and they're hungry first, but once they're full, then they want gold second. And if they've killed people to gather gold, when you kill them, they'll have gold. Like they had this, which all that stuff got cut by the time they launched because it was too hard to balance.
Well, the problem that they had, from what Richard had said, was that they let people into that world, and they figured, you know, it's like, well, people go out and hunt stuff and that, but we have this balanced ecosystem, right? Where it's like the dragon is going to eat the deer, but if the people hunt all the deer, then the dragon's hungry, so it's going to come after the town, that kind of deal. And he said the problem was that people were like a plague. They just killed everything, you know, and it wasn't with any rhyme or reason. It was just like, does it move? Kill it. And, you know, just swept the entire landscape clean. So that broke their life sim.
Yeah, players are make it harder to build that, but yeah, that was the idea. I mean, it's so much cooler when it works that way.
And it must have been tough to get it work because again, there are so many moving parts.
I mean, again, we were building it for so long that by the time we launched it had been running for years in beta too, right? So I think that I don't think it's that we were genius designers. I think it's that we had enough time and enough iterations for the design to get good.
That's fair. Maybe that'll still happen with Star Citizen. Maybe. Maybe.
So I worked on that for a while. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah, we heard you did some of the networking for that.
Yeah, I just was, you know, missing doing space sims, and so I reached out, and Chris was like, "Yeah, help us out." So we did some of the networking, but I also helped with some of like the back-end systems and tools to build some of their server systems and economy systems and stuff too. They have some really cool ideas. And Chris is like, I never knew Chris before. That was like the first time I got to meet him. And Wing Commander is one of my favorite games of all time in Privateer. So it was also very nerd-tastic to hang out with him. But like, that's a smart dude. Like we would talk about stuff and he would sit in a programmers meeting and be like, "Have you thought about this?" Like he's a real engineer on top of being like a designer and a writer and a director and like all. I'm really, having met him and worked with him, I'm very impressed by him.
Yeah, he was actually the second guest that we had on the show.
Cool. I'm very impressed by him. He's an amazingly smart dude. Oh. And I got to work with like Richard so I had this crazy meeting where I get out of the blue, I get a email from Richard Garriott. I'm just like, what? And he was like, "Hey, I was at 3DO and I saw your game and they asked me to give a ton of feedback. And so if you'd like, I'd love to share my feedback." And so I'm just like, holy cow, you don't turn this down. So I got on a plane and I went down and I met with them. And this was when they were their studio was called Destination, like the opposite of Origin.
Oh, God.
Before they became NCSoft.
Oh, God.
And it was just him and Star and like a handful of people in this little office. And so I went down and like I spent the afternoon with him one day, and he was just like, "Hey, here's a bunch of feedback." And it was like, that was incredible.
Oh my
right.
God.
To like meet him and like, yeah, because I'm a huge Ultima fan. And so, yeah, that was super cool. And anyway, that's how like later we had this insight with NCSoft when they were looking for developers. It was like, hey, I actually met Rich and he saw the work we did and stuff. And that's kind of how we got Auto Assault.
Right.
Yeah. So what's the life cycle of Auto Assault? Because the thing that I remember about it, well, first off, the very first tabletop game that I ever played was Car Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And from playing Auto Assault, I think you guys maybe played Car Wars too. So it's what was the life cycle of that thing? Because I was really interested in it, and then it was there for a short window, and then like it was shut down, and it's like I think maybe the first MMO that got shut down.
So absolutely, I'm a ridiculously big Car Wars and Auto Duel fan, and so I pitched those guys making a Car Wars Online. And it turned out that Rich's brother, Rob, who's the president of NCSoft, his favorite game that Origin ever made was Auto Duel.
Okay.
Oh my God.
And so it's like, he's like, let's do it. And it was supposed to be like a top-down, like very simplistic MMO, right? Just top-down Car Wars. Mm-hmm. And so, speaking of like dream meetings, we had a meeting with Steve Jackson, and we were like, let's make Car Wars Online.
Yeah, can we have that meeting with Steve again? Because I think it's still due.
It was like the greatest, like, I'm like, here I am. I'm like in a room with like Steve Jackson and Richard Garriott, and somehow I'm at this table with these guys, like these legends. And it was awesome. And I was telling him, like, Steve, all my ideas, and he's like, these are all the things I wanted to do in a future version. And so like I left that meeting thinking I'm making Car Wars Online, right? Like this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And it turns out that Steve is impossible to work with in terms of deal terms, and perhaps Rob also is. And so they were so far apart on their expectations of the deal that
they just have. Was it like the business side, or was it like the actual vision? Yeah. Oh, okay,
the business side, right? What Steve thought the IP was worth and what Rob was willing to pay were not even close. And so it didn't happen.
It's amazing that Auto Duel ever happened under those circumstances.
Yeah, maybe one or the other side wasn't as egotistical at the time. I don't know.
But Auto Assault itself did happen, and it lasted a few years.
It did. Well, so what happened was, as we're developing it, it's like, well, it was one of those things where it was like, well, how are we going to charge a subscription for a simplistic top-down car game when there's, EverQuest with housing and 400 missions, and you know what I mean? And so it was sort of like the competition in the MMO space. They didn't feel like it could stack up. So it was like, okay, well, let's pull the camera down and make it more 3D now, which then when you're 3D and you're looking at your environment, now the environment needs to be much cooler than it does top down, right? And it was like, well, we need player housing and crafting, and so it just like it feature creeped up a ton while we were trying to build it with a really small team. And so then the team got bigger and the budget got bigger, and then by the time it shipped, it was okay, but it was, and I blame myself more than anyone. Like I should have been able to believe in the original vision more and just been like,
we should have invented the free-to-play model right then.
Yeah, see, if it had existed at the time, yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
Or maybe we should have been $5 a month, right, instead of 15 or what? Yeah, right. Like, so I don't know.
Well, that's the status
That's
quo
kind of what
for
happened.
everything.
I'll
back
be
then,
honest.
right?
I
It was
tried it. I tried it for a month or two, and I just went back to Jumpgate. I have to be honest. It never really clicked with
it wasn't
me
as
like Jumpgate
it
did.
wasn't as good, right? It was a lot of systems that were kind of put in there to sort of have all the check boxes, right? Like the marketing check boxes, right? Like, oh, we have player housing and custom mission? Like, I'm still proud. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that Auto Assault did first, because again, I'm a big believer of like the player affecting the world, and so I think we were the first to have the idea of like instance map stuff, right? So we wanted it that when you went and blew up the base, if you drove back over there, the base is still blown up. Right. And like lots of MMOs do that now, but I don't think anybody else had ever done that. Because again, it was the same idea of like, how do I make myself feel like I matter? And so there was a lot of stuff like that I'm really proud of. We did an Auto Assault. But yeah, the game just wasn't, I don't know. It was like a lot of okay features and instead of like a few really awesome ones. Right.
Yeah.
But if you had it to do again, right, and you said, okay, now the free to play space is here, and we've got mobile platforms, and we've got like all this real estate that we could be on with a simple top down 2D thing.
I think it would be a blast.
So when you want to start? Like, I'm not doing anything this weekend.
When's that Kickstarter launching?
Yeah, I think it would be fun. Yeah, I mean, I think to Kickstarter you would need Steve Jackson. It would have to be Auto Duel.
Well, it'd have to be the name to actually get the attention, you think? Yeah,
I do.
Have you seen oh god, what do they call it? It's Gaslands. If you follow a Twitter account called Car Combat Central, which I stumbled on one day, and they've come out with this game called Gaslands, which is a competitor to Car Wars. And it's more dice mechanic stuff, but it kind of takes some inspiration from the X-Wing tabletop game, in that there's some template movement stuff that's a little more resembling that than the Car Wars turnkey thing. And it is scaled for Matchbox cars right out of the gate, right? So you just run down to Walmart, get you a Hot Wheels car, you're ready to play. Yeah, so not so bad, and the book's cheap, right? I think the Kickstarter thing for that, it was like $19 to get the book.
Cool.
Or whatever.
Cool.
And then and it's I'm just watching people on Twitter, and they're just having a blast, like just go down and get a Hot Wheels car and then like glue a bunch of 40K guns on it, and just hit bashing cars, hit it with a hammer a couple of times, Mad Max it up.
Yep.
So I mean that kind of thing is out there. So I think you could compete with it, but yes, it's definitely like for brand recognition stuff. If you wanted to come out of the gate with an audience, probably Car Wars. Although I didn't really dig the Car Wars was a 4th edition that he did, where they went back to like, here's 2 cars in a box, and that was like in the age of Magic the Gathering and stuff, where everything got super simplified and all the rules got to fit on a card. I
mean, to be honest, like, did you play Auto Duel, the Origin one?
Yeah, sure did. I thought Atari 800.
Like, why not just do that? Right? Like, it works, and you go drive from town to town, and there's guys you fight on the highways in between, and it's got all the rules, and you've got like the missions you get from the towns, and I don't know, like that's at least seems like a great starting point, because that was a really fun game.
Do you remember Games Workshop? They had that game called Dark Future, and it was a road combat thing as well.
I don't remember that.
That is actually currently in development, and it plays like it's a 3D like Spy Hunter kind of thing. And the way that they did the combat, instead of going turn-based, is they go to bullet time, and then you can actually like adjust the target arcs of your weapons and stuff.
Oh,
and,
interesting.
And like let it out of bullet time, and combat, happens. There's a gameplay video that's out there for that. It's on my wish list. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, the problem with 3D is that the camera goes behind the car.
Right.
And it makes weapons that don't fire forward nearly impossible to use. And so you end up doing dumb stuff like driving backwards and firing, right? Like, and so top down at least makes weapon arcs and side weapons and stuff like Spy Hunter like a lot more useful. And so I think that's another thing is like stay top down if you're going to do a car combat game. Like,
yeah. Now, if you could get the Spy Hunter name,
yeah, that would be another good one.
Yeah, I'd probably Midway's sitting on that one still.
Well,
that would be another good one.
Getting back to Jumpgate, we have 2 questions from the audience.
Come on, Brian. We're talking about
Star
Wars here. Jeez.
Getting back to Jumpgate, we have 2 questions from the audience. The first one is, did the length of the beta hurt Jumpgate in the long run?
No, I think it helped us a lot, actually, because we're so small. We don't have, like most publishers have like a place that can run the game on every kind of hardware, every possible, like we couldn't afford that. And so the beta allowed us to get so many bugs out before, at the time when most games launched, like what was that World War II game?
World War II Online?
Yeah. Where hard name to remember, where everybody's day one patch was the entire game.
What?
Really? I don't think we had that, right? Because the game was already effectively live, and so by the time it launched, there wasn't launch didn't have a bunch of new stuff. It was just what was in the beta live now, and then we just kept adding to it afterwards. And so
you invented early access.
Yeah, basically, we just weren't smart enough to charge for it. So I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, it's possible that people had played it and had their fun in beta and they were done with it now. But Jumpgate wasn't really a game that you finish, right? It was a game that you play, and so I don't know that it mattered that you came in and played and played for a while. I mean, we had levels and we had stuff where you could start over, but it was really more about like, hey, let's get in today and let's go flip beacons or let's go do a cargo run or whatever. And you got in and you did what you wanted to do that night with your friends. And I don't know that's ever over or, complete or whatever.
I do have to compliment you on the role-playing system in the game. It unlike, again, I'm going to bash Elite. I know I do, but I felt like it deserves it. The leveling system in Jumpgate felt like right for you got this ship at this level, you can get this radar at this level, and it felt like you had to earn that. It wasn't just an infusion of money. You had to actually spend the time to level up to get that light miner or that transport or whatever,
Well, how did the leveling work? Was it like experience that you got for killing things, or
or really a mission? Missions is where you got most of your XP.
Missions. Yeah, I love
it's just doing missions. Yeah. Since then, I have so many ideas of this would have been so much better. But for instance, if I was to do it again, I wouldn't have levels at all. I would have licenses, sort of like Gran Turismo. Right. So it's okay, you've run a bunch of cargo. So now you've unlocked cargo license B, which then unlocks these things in the game that you can now fly or purchase.
Ooh,
right.
And
that. Then if you want to be a mercenary, then you have to have done so many jobs. Then you get your mercenary license which unlocks different stuff related to mercenaries.
Oh,
I think that's a more natural,
organic,
because the level is kind of a weird thing.
Yeah,
right.
Where licenses make sense to me. If you want to be a trucker, you don't get to drive like you say, uranium tow on day one. First, you got to let's see you deliver 10 small cheap things. I'm not going to trust you to hire you to take this expensive stuff yet. And then the other thing is it would show kind of what you're experienced at, right? So just because you're level 50 doesn't mean you're a great tow pilot or a great escort pilot. It just means you're level 50. Where if you had classes, now I think it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, no, I like that. Speaking of a tow, I don't know if people understand what that is who haven't played.
Semi in space, yeah.
Yeah, basically for a while it was the big cargo hauler until the freighters, which are even bigger, were introduced. But there were about a dozen different types of ships in the game. There were 3 factions. They all had the same types, but each ship was a little different. How did you come to design and iterate all the different ships?
Well, the idea originally was Peter had never done 3D art ever. He was a sculptor. So he was a classically trained, incredible fine artist who was like, computers look fun. And so we were learning on the fly. Like, we didn't know how texturing worked. We didn't know how modeling worked. We didn't know how, like, any of the tricks of how to texture better and smarter. And, like, I don't know, we learned so much stuff. It's kind of why the graphics were crap, even for the time, is that we didn't know. We just didn't know any of this stuff.
But didn't the graphics help it run better on a modem and a wider range of computers? Like, wasn't that beneficial in some ways?
Sure. Our system requirements were like 0. And because of that, like, I got some neat opportunities because, like, 3DFX would be like, hey, can we demo your game in our booth? Because your game runs at 60 FPS and nothing else does. You know? And so we got some cool opportunities like that to, like, show off in some places where you normally wouldn't because it ran so well. But that's not because of, like, amazing programming skills. It's because our art was just so low poly, it ran really well.
So is that why the ships are a bit on the, I'm not gonna say ugly, but simpler side compared to some other sci-fi flight games?
Absolutely. And we didn't do, one of the things I learned later that's like, it would have been amazing, was reading about how they made Star Wars and how Lucas hired industrial designers to do his ship design. And the reason is that industrial designers think about how shit works, right? They're like, well, if there's a cockpit here, then there needs to be a way into it. And so where does the ladder fit? And you wouldn't want to ever put a ladder in front of an air intake. And you know what I mean? Like, so because he had industrial designers building his ships, they always looked like a ship could actually look. And, we didn't have, like a modern game company has like a designer creating a design and then an art sketching it out, and you go through 20 iterations there, and then you go to 3D concepting and you move that. Like, we didn't have any of that stuff, right? It's just Peter going, I don't know, maybe it looks like this, and like at a high level, the idea was that the Soul Rain guys were like sleek, so they were supposed to look like a sexy, like something you'd buy from like a car dealership, right? The Octavian guys were supposed to look like war machines, and so they were supposed to be aggressive kind of looking. Right. And then the Quantar dudes were like religious, and all their stuff was named after storms, and so it was all supposed to, follow those ideas. And that was kind of at a high level it.
Yeah, I always played Quantar, which was the more religious mining faction, and I love their ships. Like, the Gust and the Comsin, the heavy miner, are like my favorite ships.
I played Quantar too, mostly.
Yeah, their ships are fun.
Yeah, the 3 of us each had a faction of our that we like. Like, really? Steve played Octavian, and Peter played Soul Rain mostly, and so we kind of each had our own that we sort of made sure they were keeping up, like that. Hey, these guys are more powerful. So one of the 3 of us would be arguing for making something better for that one group or whatever. So, another thing I'm still super proud of that Jumpgate did first, which was the idea of like, so when we would introduce an item, like a new gun, the players would have to build the factories.
Right. Yeah. And those were events. Those were events to build those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all 3 factions would get the mission. And it was up to the faction for how quick they built the factory before they would get the weapon. And so I loved that idea that there's this competitiveness going on where they're working together to build this factory. And when it's done, this new gun unlocks for them.
Yeah, I remember partaking. I remember partaking in some of those events as a hauler, and just having a blast with like, oh my god, you have to get this here now. I'm like, I'm working on it. This is heavy.
Well, you
I
had to
can't
have
move so
the
fast.
miners had to be getting the materials, and then the haulers had to be bringing it all, bringing all the converted parts over, and then they docked with the factories, and that's how they got done. I don't know. I thought it was cool.
Oh, it was great. No, I love that. I probably spend most of the time mining in those because you guys, the mining in your game is still my favorite mining in any space game. Like,
so I could tell you where that came from.
Please.
It basically came from a lack of my ability to figure out how to destroy the asteroids and bring them back later, because they were all built into the map. And so what we did is we instead said that like asteroids get hot, and the hotter they are, the less yield there is while you're mining them, which is why they changed colors or whatever. And then we're like, but it's so people are just flying up to them and just sitting there. And we're like, well, that's dumb. And so we're like, let's reward you for flying. And so basically the faster you were moving around the asteroid,
oh my god,
the more yield you got in your mining. So if you wanted to mine quickly, you had to like move and maneuver and fly while you were mining, versus just flying up and sit there. And so that's where that system kind of evolved from. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, I love orbit mining. I love it so much. That's probably what I spent most of the game doing is orbit mining.
Yeah.
Now, where did the idea for pure asteroids come from?
I think it was just rare. I mean, that was it.
Okay. Because those are, folks, if you're not sure, if you don't know what I'm talking about, every non-station system has one asteroid in it that is a pure commodity. Like there are ice asteroids, there are radioactive asteroids, and they're mostly one thing, but they'll get you a bunch of other little things as well. But there's like you'll find this one asteroid in a certain amount of space around the center gate that is just one thing, and it's usually fairly expensive. It's also hard to find, and eventually they pop. And you have to find the next one. So you're like staring at the radar. You can't really orbit mine when you're doing that because you got to stare at the radar and see where the next one pops up. I have so much fun doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was just to be, like have something special to like search for.
Yeah, it made mining even more fun.
And the mining thing, that's the thing that I noticed that Evacron kind of borrowed from it, is the orbiting the asteroid thing. Well, you can sit still. I don't know if it worked this way in Jumpgate or not, but it's like you always did it by orbiting around it, but could you just kind of like wiggle the beam around without moving?
No, you had to be actually moving.
Okay.
It was based on the speed of your ship.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, you had to
and that's far more fun because
you could do it though if you wanted to. If you wanted to, you could just fly up and stop. It just would be much slower.
Yeah.
So we decided that's how we would reward you, is like if you wanted to take the risk and fly around it, you could fly around it.
Yeah. But I guess the other way is like AFK mining, right? It's like I gotta go to the bathroom. And get
and you can do that. It's just gonna take a lot longer.
Put a rubber band on the trigger.
Yep.
Yeah, and you can do that. It's just going to take a lot longer.
I mean, I think one of the problems of Jumpgate was based off of the feature of Jumpgate.
It has like no problems. How dare you? No, I'm sorry.
And I mean, Elite suffers from this even more because their world is even bigger. Is that you're playing an online game and you maybe don't see anybody. I mean, Eve still can have that too, right? Where you might have a play session where you don't see anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's because space is massive, and when it's 3D, it's even more massive. And so that's one of the things that I've been thinking about a little bit, is like, if you were to do it differently, because I feel like that to me is some of the negative of Jumpgate, is that you would, like people would tell me like, oh, I would play your game and I would read a book at the same time. And I'm just like, I don't know that that's a good thing.
That's really not.
That was not.
You know what I mean?
I
would rather you have a lot of intense fun doing this thing you want to do, and then stop playing and read a book, right? Like instead of like, there's this game forces you to like sit and stare at the screen for 20 minutes. Like, I don't think that's fun. And so that's what we've been trying to think about a little bit, is like, what's the right fix for that? Like, what's the right way to make that
Well, in the original game,
good.
when there were more players, it never felt that bad because you can always talk to. You had the global chat, which was great,
Right.
where you could talk to everyone in the universe, and that's how you pass the time. The problem is right now the current iteration of Jumpgate has barely anybody playing it,
Right.
And so you kind of
So it's
lose.
even more empty.
Yeah, so you really lose that reason. Like one of the reasons to log in and play, besides the game being fun, was to talk to your friends. While you're traversing between gates, and that always made the traversal a lot easier. I never read. I would listen to music, but I was always talking to people.
Did you listen to Jumpgate Pirate Radio?
I did sometimes, but usually I found that funk, Motown, and disco were the best mining and hauling music for me. A lot of Al Green, a lot of disco, but so it made traveling a lot easier when you had like that CB radio to talk to your friends, which I thought was a great feature. So I wouldn't say that's as much as a negative as you might think, because when you have a good player population, being able to talk to everybody really alleviates that a lot. So
yeah, it's good to hear.
Yeah, because
it's good to hear.
Like I said, I wouldn't have played so many thousands of hours if I was reading at the same time, So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. But we do have another question. Do you guys ever have an explanation for what caused the Great Collapse? So we have a lore question.
Let's see.
No, hang on. Before you get to there, let's explain what that question entails. So the game is called Jumpgate: The Reconstruction Initiative, and part of what you're doing is you're rebuilding this whole universe after some kind of massive galactic collapse that ruined space travel for how long? Lots of years.
The idea was that it was so great that it even like changed like the laws of physics of the universe.
Oh my God! Right.
And so things that used to work one way no longer even work that way. And so mankind had been shut down and away from each other for a long, long time. And this group came up with this new idea, which was these gates that allowed this fast travel using like the wormholes that were like left behind from that event. And so now that there's these wormholes or anomalies basically everywhere, they figure out this system to build the gates. We never really went into like the specifics of who or what caused it, to be honest. It was just we needed the idea was that we wanted players to like build the universe. Again, it's like how are you leaving your mark on this world? And so we wanted like instead of like a full world that you're just kind of coming into, we wanted like a more empty world that you're building, that you're like everybody who's there is a part of it. And like I think people like from the beta loved that, like I was there when we added these sectors or we built this new gate,
like Lothar's
right? And so it was like you get this, you get this sense of owning it. Right? Like I was a part of building this thing, which I think is cooler than, here's the world, it's done. Now just go play in it. Right. So that was the logic behind it.
Was that the plan for those anomalies to eventually make them into jump gates into new systems?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Because I always wondered why we were scanning those things.
Yep, you were scanning them to potentially build gates.
That's pretty awesome. Now, there was one thing that really polarized the player base, and I think it kind of still does to this day. Player-owned stations.
Yep.
Eventually, folks, if you're unaware, the game added the ability for the very wealthy players to build their own stations. And this caused a lot of consternation because people would use these stations to basically hoard important stuff. So what was the idea originally behind player-owned stations, and how did those eventually, like how did you feel about the implementation? Oh, right. I just was informed that we need a 30-second bio break. So if I had some music, I would put it on right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna take one myself. I'll be there.
Okay. This is not something that usually happens, folks. But in the last, there was an episode, I think about 10 episodes ago, where both the guest and I just were like, we gotta go. Like right now. So, yeah, that's, this is what happens when you do stuff live. People need to go to the bathroom. It happens. But once...
had to tow something to the black hole.
Oh! Oh! Yeah, I had to shake hands with my best friend. It's probably one of my favorite euphemisms. But tow something to the black hole is...
Sorry. So,
no
like,
worries.
I could tell you where the idea of them was and where we kind of wanted to take it. So again, it was, so you're building all this stuff, but you're only building it for the other groups. And so we wanted to start to have something that you could build that was like yours instead of always building something for the factions. And yeah, we debated back and forth as to whether or not they should be like destructible, and whether or not they should be like, can you limit who comes in or not? And we ended up with that you could, but as you say, it had the downside of like you could hide materials away, which was kind of the negative of them.
Yeah.
But the goal was that the eventual goal is like what we wanted to have was like basically like aircraft carriers. So that you would have like you'd have flying stations that you could like land in, and then you could get a bunch of you in one of those, and then it could fly through space.
Oh.
And like that, so that's where it was going. That was the idea, was that you would have like player owned like aircraft carriers, and we were trying to get to like player, like we only ever had one player per ship, and we were really trying to get to like players manning turrets and stuff. And so that was kind of where it was heading, and it was like step one of that. We just never made it to step two.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame, because they were useful. My favorite thing about them was when you can afford a hangar, so you didn't have to lose all your stuff with your ship when switching ships. I did love that, but it was so expensive.
Yeah, I mean that was the idea, but you're right. It added these. It added like an artificial place where you could hide stuff that before then you didn't really have such a thing.
Yeah, and sadly those don't show up on the whatever the APIs I think they are. So like you can't look, like there's a site right now where you can look up inventory in Jumpgate, which is amazing. Like I'm doing a mission where I'm running synthetics, and so I know I have to go to Sol Ring Core to get them to do this mission. I know that.
Yeah, we output everything into the web so that you could scrape that data and use it yourself. Like this is before there was like cool sites like what's a good one? Like MMO Head or whatever, right? Like that you could that go to and you list it, every item in this game, and here's all what's pros and cons or whatever. Like that didn't really exist at the time, and so we were putting this all out there so you had at least a place to see some of that stuff. So I thought it was cool that people built those apps for that.
Oh, it's very useful for miners and haulers who need like, I need to make some fiber optics. Which station makes those, and what does it need? Okay, it's really handy for that kind of thing. And again, I wish Elite would do something like that, but then again, it doesn't really matter because their economy is just a bunch of nothing.
Yeah, it's probably harder when you're making a game that is like ours was fixed, right?
Right.
We know what the sectors are, and so we know who produces what, and we can balance it, right? We can make sure that there's whatever you want to call it. Like there's in design terms, it's like you have the faucets and you have the drain. And so like, if there's not enough faucets, then it doesn't work. And if there's not enough drains, it builds up. Right. So we could design around all that stuff because it's a controlled system. When you're making a game that's like, there's 1 trillion stars and you can go to every star and each one might have something else, then it's harder. And I don't actually know much about Elite Online. I mean, I've played it and I think it's beautiful, but I don't know how like their economy works. Like, I don't know if they're like, hey, we don't have enough faucets of copper, so the next time someone discovers a system, we should make it a copper system or something. Like, I don't know.
No, it's their economy is all hand wavium.
Yeah,
okay.
None of it matters. None of it. Like, you get a mission to take beer or bio waste from one station to another, and it's just for that mission. Like, it doesn't matter that station didn't actually like need it or anything.
Oh, I see. It's not real.
It's like, hey, haul 20 tons of transducers over there, and then you get there and then you get a mission. Hey, haul 20 tons of transducers right back where you came from.
Yeah,
suspension of disbelief out the window.
That's too bad.
It's really a shame because if I recall, the earlier Elite games did do all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It did matter. So it's just
so I mean, Jumpgate again. Elite was probably like our #1 inspiration of a space game, and then also Privateer, right? Like,
of course,
because that's what they were. It was about buying and selling, and I know that this station's short on these, and I could make money running this from here to here, and so you do the run, right? But if you do it too much, that station gets too many, and the price goes up, and now that run's not good anymore.
Exactly, that's what you want with.
Yep.
Yeah, the problem that they've got is they plan for however many people in space, right? So they wanted things to be fairly static because they saw a lot of room for players to exploit and break the economy. And because that's like the Ultima Online thing, right? It's like if you put it in there and you let players influence it, players are going to break the hell out of it.
But then you have EVE Online, which has a fully player run economy, and they actually have an economist on staff,
right?
And it's really an amazing thing to watch that economy work. So
I mean, they're probably they're the gold standard, I would say, right? Of like,
oh yeah,
space economy done right. Like, no one's done it better than Eve.
Oh no one's done it better than Eve. Oh my god.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's so much of it that you just don't even really participate in, and you don't have to, because it's like the people who play the economy game, not the spaceship game, they're the ones that really run that.
Yep.
But you have a little part in it. You can have like your own little store somewhere in a station. You go like in some hole in the wall corner, and then you can actually be important to the people out there. But you're not the entire universe economy or anything.
No.
But it's like you can have your own little kingdom, and that's the thing. Elite doesn't want you to own anything.
You can also mine like a little bit and turn in some to a station. Someone will pat you on the head. Good boy. Go mine some more, and it'll actually like. The stuff you mined will help somebody somewhere,
Right.
So it's kind of amazing how that works. But your game, oh, wait a minute. We have another question. What's this? Ask Scott how he felt about the way Jumpgate created quote-unquote legendary players, like Rolio, Fellblade, Hurricane, and others. Did you ever imagine that would happen?
No, never thought of it. In fact, we didn't know it was happening until a lot longer.
Oh, really?
We're just like, man, this Rolio guy is awesome, and he's playing all the time. And it's like, well, that's because it's a bunch of people. Like, I didn't know that for a long time. Embarrassingly,
wait, it wasn't just one guy.
No, that's what they're talking about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you had these accounts that people would like share, and they would all fly. And
oh, jeez.
It's super cool. I mean, it made the game better. It certainly made the game better.
Well, that's how you get stuff like the new EverQuest expansion would come out, and then like 3 days later you'd have somebody at like max level, and it's like, how the heck did somebody do that? They must not have slept. And it was like, well, it was actually 5 people,
right?
And they
who combined didn't sleep, but yeah. So that's what it was. It was you had these accounts where it was like, role played is like, this guy is a hunter and he's a jerk and he's going to kill everybody, and this guy is whatever. But those were all shared accounts, which I think is fun.
That is fun. I had no idea. Like, God.
Yeah, that's why, again, like I feel like allowing you, it's like another thing people talked about is like they wanted multiple accounts. And I'm like, I kind of like that you have one because it forces you to be that role. But I get that you're like, but today I want to be a pirate and tomorrow I want to be a defender. And so it's kind of nice to have both roles available to you. So I don't know. It's one of those things I'm still torn on a little bit.
That's fair. I actually liked having one character. You know, I really, because then you put all your focus into that one person, and you really care about that character. Of course,
community as well, because you know who somebody is.
Yeah.
Plus, it's not like, well, I have one guy in this faction and one guy in that faction.
Yep.
So,
I mean, I can't stop you from buying 2 accounts and doing exactly that anyway, but I still feel like that's a lot less likely than you know what you said, and that's kind of why I like the class. Like the license class thing too.
Yeah.
Because then you can be like, you know what I want to do? Start doing mercenary stuff. So then you start at the bottom and start doing mercenary stuff. You don't have to like re-roll or start over or pick a different class. Like you can be one guy that does all of these things. You just have to earn them sort of individually.
It's kind of a shame you don't have the IP, because that sounds like a wonderful idea to bring Jumpgate back. And I think, as we were saying before the show started, now would be the time to bring Jumpgate back. You know, in a new, prettier iteration. You know,
or top-down 2D, and on tablets. Or
there's actually a game.
You can solve both problems.
Well, there's actually a game coming out that's kind of like that called Starfighter Infinity. That reminds me a lot of Jumpgate, but it is indeed a top-down 2D game. There's also
if we could get you working with Crunchy Leaf, and then you guys come out with Jumpgate 3030, and that would be a beautiful thing.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've played 3030 Space War, but it's a divine game. So
I have not.
Top down RPG.
Yeah, the full name is
the game
3030.
It's the game Privateer wanted to be.
It's called 3030 Death War Redu, RADUX, and it's really a excellent top-down space game, like really one of the best. So if you're hankering for a new top-down space game, that'd be the one to get. But let's move on. Let's move away from Jumpgate a bit and talk about what you're working on now, because you're in charge of a company called Worm with a Y, Wormbite.
Yes.
And you're making a game called Night Marchers. Is that right?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
So it's the same thing. It's like I really, again, I like the idea of making a difference in the game world and changing the world you play in. And I'm also a big post-apocalyptic sort of nut. Wasteland is one of my favorite games ever. And then Fallout and all the new Fallouts and stuff too. But like, I just love that genre. That's why I did Auto Assault. And I've been thinking for a while about like how, you know, post-apocalyptic is always like Mad Max. It's like brown and dusty and dead. And I'm like, what if instead it was like paradise? And so I was like, well, I think Hawaii is the most beautiful place in the world. And no one's ever really done a Hawaii game, which is surprising to me. And so I was like, well, maybe there's something here. And so it was a game that we were just sort of like, you know, we'd go to lunch at work and we'd brainstorm it a little bit, and someone would be like, hey, what about this? And so over a number of months, like it started to come together that it was like, man, there's a story here and there's like something we could actually do here. And so at the start of 2017, we stopped all of our outsource work, like working on Star Citizen and everything else. And we just said, let's make our own game again. Like, let's go do this. But instead of multiplayer and online, like, let's do a cool single player story that's like super heavy on player choice changes the world. And so that's what we did. That's kind of the background on Night Marchers. And so we've been researching Hawaii and building some stuff. And again, we're a tiny team building an open world game, which is usually like it's like a 40 or 400 person team kind of game. like Fallout or Oblivion or Skyrim or, etc. And so here, so we've been taking a lot of our ideas about how to build content faster and building a lot of tools, and we've been building this game. And recently I've started to actually meet native Hawaiians and sort of talk to them about our story, and we've been getting more and more of them involved. And so now our storyline is becoming much more like authentic Hawaii, which is really cool. And we're sort of trying to lock down a publisher and try to go from just a handful of us building it to a little bit bigger team and ship it. But that's kind of what we're working on right now.
So the website says you can tap into the spirit world. Is that going to be like magic in the game?
Yeah. So in Hawaiian lore, there are certain people that can see spirits. And one of the ways that you can become one of those people is to have your spirit leave your body, but then be sort of brought back to life again. And so that's how the game starts. You're actually killed, and you're brought back to life by your spirit guide, and he starts teaching you. And the idea is that you're a native Hawaiian, but you didn't really believe any of this stuff. You'd never seen spirits, and you're like, whatever, they're just stories, right? And now you're like seeing it all for the first time. So what's kind of fun is like the protagonist of the story and you, the player, are sort of learning Hawaiian lore kind of together. Ooh. And so you're going through and you're rebuilding this island, and then you have to kind of choose, like, how do you want to rebuild the island? And what's funny is our bad guys are TRI.
Nice.
Just some of the only Jumpgate people we get, but
nice.
They're like the scientist faction on the island. All right.
They had that enforcer ship that I wanted to fly so badly.
Yeah, that was fun. That was always us.
I know. I want one of those, but we never had it. So that sounds like a lot of fun. And again, I have to say thank you for making something that's single player. Thank you very much, because I love a good single player game. So I have to.
Yeah, well, I like games where I can leave a mark. It's why I like BioWare stuff, and I like Bethesda stuff. Like, I like stuff where I get to like have some say in the story.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to do that with multiplayer. It's a lot harder to do.
And it is, and it's only a couple people have done it well. I always felt like KOTOR did a really good job, or I guess KOTOR is the online one, of like allowing me to make my own choices in the story, but still being multiplayer. I thought those guys did a really great job.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if you ever played it, but
I've played a little of it. Oh, we have another question from the audience. Apparently, this person has been learning the Unreal Engine for a game they're envisioning based on Asheron's Call. And they want to know if Asheron's Call ever influenced any of your design decisions.
I didn't play a lot of Asheron's Call, but the executive producer on Auto Assault is a guy named Jeremy Gaffney, who wrote probably 90% of the code of the original Asheron's Call.
Holy crap.
And so he always had all kinds of cool insights and ideas to help us as we were building Auto Assault. So he certainly was an influence, sort of indirectly, but I didn't play a lot of it. I know that it had, like, you could build your own cities, which was kind of cool. Again, it was still, very player oriented, which I think is, as I said, like, that seems like that was like an old MMO thing. And then like new MMOs kind of all copied EverQuest, and they were just like straight storylines and leveling, and you just played through the story, and no one really copied Ultima Online. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everyone's
it was kind of like Ultima did it in the Wild West, and then Sony did it with so much success that it became safe money.
And then WoW,
and as soon as you get safe money, then it's trouble.
And then WoW did it, and it was off to the races after that. Then everyone really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And
so it's like the kind of like, but I mean, what's cool is at least like WoW is starting to get some of these things in now, right? Where like in WoW, after you do something in a map, the map changes. And so at least you start to feel that you're making a difference in the game. Like they're starting to incorporate some of that stuff, which I think is cool.
Yeah, apparently there was a cataclysm of some type. And apparently, so many people still play that, which is just amazing to me. Like, it's been running for well over a decade. That's just great.
I still play it.
I think it's become a social platform. So that's like, this is where all my friends are. Because a new hot game will come out. People will jump over there, play it for a while. But then it's like, well, I'm going to go back to WoW because that's where all my friends are. So
that's what I do. I play WoW for like 4 or 5 months when a new content comes out. You know, get to know everyone in the guild again and chat and play and have a bunch of fun doing the new stuff. And then when it gets sort of grindy at the end, I just quit. And then I come back the next time new stuff comes out.
I have to say, you bring up the word grindy, and this is something we've talked about. Jumpgate to me never felt overtly grindy. Did you consciously try to avoid that? Or is that something that just happened as a part of the design?
So we did, but I feel like we failed. Like I felt like our missions were terrible. And it's something that always really bothered me because I feel like what happened was people would be like, okay, the way to make XP the fastest is to do this, do a transport run from this station to this station. And then they would just sit and fly back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was just like, I have so many ideas of how you could do that better. And it could be, again, more dependent on what's going on in the game.
That's the thing you run into MMO wise anyway, though, is like you could put a ton of content in there, but the players will find the one thing that makes dollar per minute the fastest. Right. And then they'll just grind that. And then they bitch like this game's so grindy. And it's like, no, we put all this variety in there. Right. It just doesn't happen to pay in the 90th percentile. So
right. Absolutely. But see, I think the way around that is to make the content even more game driven, right? So that like, like the missions you were describing in Elite, like don't ever have that and only have stuff based on what's going on. And so, if water runs from this station to this station is the best run, but that station doesn't need water anymore, they go. And so you kind of naturally you sort of break that by, okay, it's the best run, but once a few people do it, it's over. And now it's not a valuable run anymore. And so when you log on, every day might be a different best thing to do. Based on, if no one's flying escorts, then maybe escorts are paying more because there's no one's doing it. And so if you could fluctuate the payouts, then I think I could break that. Anyway, it's just something I think about a lot.
Man, I really wish you could make a new Jumpgate because all your ideas for this, for a new one sound like, I especially love the license system. That sounds so great.
Yeah, well, I could tell you that I'm thinking about it a lot lately. Like,
really?
What would I do? How would it work? But I have to believe there's like a spot for it. Like,
there's a spot
how would we stand out from? Because you've got Elite, which is the massive, huge space exploration MMO, and you've got Star Citizen, which is like, I don't even know if there's such a thing, but it's like the quadruple A.
It'll never be finished.
You know what I mean?
It'll never be finished.
Space.
It'll never be finished.
I've got it. Battle Royale. 100 spaceships parachute onto an island. And then
no, please God.
Well, it would tie into the Hawaii thing because Hawaii is an island. And then
please God.
I could run a tiki bar, a post-apocalyptic tiki bar that would serve spirits.
We're going to tie them all together.
The spirits on the see.
I think there is a space for it because people get burnt out quickly by Elite. Star Citizen is not. I mean, Star Citizen is nowhere near done. And I think if you pretty Jumpgate up and made the systems better, but still kept it like as social and open as it originally was, I think people would come to it. I honestly do.
Well, I think I do too, and I think that I want to make sure that we've really thought about like, what's our vision? What are our design pillars? Like, what are the things that like thinking about the old game, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, okay, what made the old Jumpgate special, right? And I think it's like the flight engine is probably the first thing most people say. And so it's like, all right, you got to capture that flight engine again. But then the next thing is like, I think to me, it was all about players building the universe. At least that's what it was about to me. That like, I felt like I was serving a purpose. Like I wasn't just running empty missions that infinitely generate from a random mission generator. It's like, no, it's like this station needs water. And so here's a mission to take water to them because they actually need it right now. And why do they need water? Well, because some other station needs hydro plants that are built from synthetics and water and copper and something else, right? And so like it's all real and it's all being asked for. And so my role matters. And so like that to me is like the biggest point, I guess, of the game that I've been trying to think about a lot of like, okay, so how would you make a modern game like that where it matters? And so we've been messing around with it, like starting to fool around with some ideas and stuff. It's only in the like, does this make sense phase of thinking, but like I'm thinking about it for sure.
Well, if you ever actually start to make the thing, we would love to have you back on because, oh my God, that would be like the high point of my life. Seriously.
Well, I mean, to be honest, what I would want is I would want as many Jumpgate players involved as early as possible.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're not being, because when you're a developer and you're sitting in a room and you're like, I've got this great idea. And then we all drink the Kool-Aid and you spend a month building it and you release it. And everyone's like, well, that's the worst idea you ever had. You know what I mean? And so like having more players who sort of get what we're trying to do early involved with the project is how we would approach it.
Well, if you do think about it, oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Okay.
But we should start wrapping it up because I'm getting really hungry and losing my mind. So, Scott, I want to thank you so much for coming on, being so forthcoming about Jumpgate's successes and not successes. Because, I mean, I love the game, but it's also great to hear developers talk about the actual process of developing. So it's always fascinating to hear how the sausage is made. We love that. So thank you very much.
I'm glad to share. It was a labor of love, I'll tell you that.
So folks, if you are interested in what we've been talking about, there's actually a not really legal but emulated version of Jumpgate running out there right now. It is totally free. It is at jumpgate-tri.org. We don't know who's running it. We think some people in Russia. We're not sure. We've never really been clear. Hobbits. We've never really been dwarves. We've never really been clear as to who's running it, but someone is, and it runs great. It runs on nothing. Like it runs on a potato. You can run it on anything. Right out of the box. It's really fantastic flight engine. Great actual game. You should definitely check it out. If you're interested, there are several videos on the YouTube channel showing how everything works and whatnot. If you want to get a look-see and how everything flies, but it's really just a special game that deserves to be played. And if we had more players, more people would. It's kind of a catch-22. It needs more people to get more people. So if more people were playing it, I think more people would play it. Like I would start playing it more if there were more people to talk to while I was playing it. So
yeah, it's hard. The learning curve is tough.
Yeah, it's tough.
So be prepared.
You know what would make it happen is if you could play it on mobile, like on your phone, and it was like free to play somehow.
I don't know how you do that.
And I think that would be your player base adoption.
I guess if Vendetta can do it with their virtual joystick and whatnot, or their tilt controls, which I've not liked either. I've tried both, and it just does not feel right.
Well, I was playing Vendetta on my TV because I bought one of those Shield TVs.
Oh,
So I'm
how'd you
sitting
like?
out there with a gamepad in the living room playing it. Well, it's just like playing it on the PC at that point.
Right. Well, that's
Except
cool.
with my living room. It feels like I'm getting away with something naughty. 'Cause it's like, yeah, I'm playing this on my TV.
So,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that, like, I don't know that you could port the old game, but you could certainly, if I'm going to make a new one, I think one of the things we would do is it would run on everything.
yeah.
Because again, space games can. We don't have terrain and we don't have all this other stuff, and most of the objects are so far away, they're at like a low LOD anyway all the time. And so, like,
Right.
if I was to do it, it would run on everything, like phones, consoles, every VR, PC, Mac, Linux, like run on everything. Because why not?
Why not? Exactly.
Right?
Why
Game
the hell
engines
not?
now run on everything, so I don't have to do all that work, right? Like
Right.
Unreal already works on phones and
So does Unity.
on
You
this.
know,
Yeah,
all
either
that
of those,
stuff.
you could run it on a Switch, you could run it on. I mean, it runs on everything. So why not?
Oh,
right?
God.
This would be
Yeah.
my take.
I would if,
So what-
if Jumpgate came out for the Switch, I'd buy a Switch today. Like, I would be going to Amazon right now and buying a Switch. No
yeah, like if-
question.
Why not? Right?
Exactly.
Like that
Why
has
not?
2 joysticks. It has the controls. It has a nice screen. It's way more than powerful enough to do something that looks really good. Like, yeah, I mean, that's something I'm thinking about too, is like, I think that's another way we could be different and like stand out from the other space games, is we would be the game that runs on everything. Like if the platform runs games that, like, the new version of Jumpgate would run on it. It would be our approach anyway.
Now that sounds. I just found out some Tealton in our chat just told me that they're porting Everspace to the Switch. So
Neat.
wow,
You should. Yeah, you should. I mean, the Switch is it as powerful as like an Xbox One that runs
No.
4K? No, but it doesn't need to be.
No, it doesn't. need to be.
I think it runs like 720 when you're running it handheld. or
Yeah,
something.
it
I mean,
drops the
so-
res down to keep the frame rates and
Yeah,
stuff.
and
but
so-
but it goes 1080 whenever you hook it to a TV. But
Right. So you could.
Are you familiar with the NVIDIA Shield tablet?
Yeah.
The last. Okay, so that had a K1 in it, and the X1, which is in the Shield TV version, is exactly what's in a Switch. So if you've messed around with a Shield tablet, it is the same thing.
Oh.
Yeah. So we could run on Shields. And then,
Oh,
like,
man.
if you had an iPad or like one of the big Samsung pads, like, those are incredible screens, and like modern phones are very powerful.
I know, right? Oh my God, so super.
And
powerful.
so you would be easy to do like phone support too, and like you
Plus
could even do
your
something
network
like,
load was so low because you were built for modems,
right.
so you're not going to eat up somebody's data plan.
Again, it's
and
a
I-
space
you know-
game, so it doesn't need terrain. It doesn't need a sky.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God. Oh, so many ideas. Make it happen, please.
Sure. I'll just snap the fingers and we're done.
I will back whatever Kickstarter you launch for this. Whatever it is, I will be a backer. No
All right,
worries
sounds good.
at all. And there is a hunger for this. Like, I don't know if you saw the Starflight 3 campaign that's going on right now, but it's up to 90,000, and it hasn't even gone full. It hasn't even gone full public yet, which is amazing.
I love that game. That's the first PC game I ever played.
Me too. Oh my God. First DOS
That got me
PC
off
game.
the Apple II and onto the PC. Was Starflight. Like, I loved that game.
For me, it was the TRS-80. That's what got me off the TRS-80 to the to DOS, and God, yes. And I'm so excited about it. So yeah, there is a hunger for these types of games. So please make it happen. Anyway, folks. Thank you so much for listening. And again, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I apologize that last week's the podcast from 2 weeks ago hasn't gone out yet for the MP3. I was on vacation. I've just been really busy. So it should go up sometime this week, probably around the same time. This will go up in MP3 form. So a couple of quick programming notes before we wrap up. This month, we're calling it the month of Borderlands, where every Thursday night we are going to be playing Borderlands 2 this month because we want to get through it. Because there are other games we want to play. We're not enjoying Borderlands 2. It's just we realize if we only play it once a month, it's going to be like Star Citizen might come
couple
out.
years.
Star Citizen might come out before we finish. So maybe. So yeah, we're gonna try and plow through a bunch of it this month. And then next week for the podcast, we're still working on a topic for that one. So hopefully we'll have something great, well, or at least something entertaining, if not great.
Oh, just a quick note for those wondering about EDF and we're returning to that. That will be next month.
Yeah, we'll return to that next month.
So episode 2 will be at the end of next month.
Yeah, that'll be in September. So we're still playing EDF. We're still farming. We're still playing it. That's a great thing about EDF is you can play it either single player or just online by yourself and farm armor and equipment as the day is long. So we'll be doing that over the next month. So next time we play, we'll have more toys because that's what that game is about. All the toys to kill the bugs. So great. So everyone, Scott, again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been amazing. And everyone, thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will see you next time. Have a great night. Bye.